Hello.
Hello.
Am I centered okay again?
Your forehead is all cut off. You can't
Okay.
see yourself?
How about I can't it shows up fine for my on my side. I have no idea why it always does that, but how about now? A little crooked, but is that good?
Sit back a little.
That's a I mean, I could sit across the room.
Okay, down a little. There you go.
Okay,
Yep.
great.
There's
So,
that handsome face.
hi. Um so real quick for those who don't know you, could you introduce yourself?
Sure. My name's Nicole Cruz. I am a chaos to clarity consultant and holistic resilience specialist, and I am really glad to be here with my wonderful boyfriend
Thank
and
you.
my business partner.
My name is Eric Cruz. I am Nicole Cruz's mother.
What? You're not my mother.
Nicole, Nicole
Hi,
is my
Nicole
mother.
Cruz is my mother. It was a typo in the voice.
A typo in the voice. It was a
Anyway,
verbal typo.
a verbal typo. We got it.
Mhm.
Um, so we met
This is
in
my butt.
a divorce group on Facebook, and through I don't know how many conversations over the course of 7, 8, 9 months, something along those lines. We decided to meet. With no like significant expectations or anything else. Just a shared love and passion for travel and like taking our kids to see new things and have new experiences. And then we had a pretty instant connection once we were in person. Um, so I feel like I got really, really lucky in dating because I had gone on, I think it was 2 dates before you and I went on our first date, even though it was pretty much strictly platonic and like there was no long-term thought of what could be at that particular point in time. And then things just evolved. But as I continue to review all of the posts or like look through all the posts in the divorce group that we met in, there is still so much pain and anger and like toxicity within the dating space now, whether people are just fresh out of a relationship, going through a really, really awful divorce, or even 5 to 10 years post divorce, still struggling to kind of figure out where they fit and understanding how dating dynamics have changed over the last five to for in some cases 20 years. Some cases people were with their partner for 20 to 25 years, and now they're just getting back into dating where everything culture wise has changed in the dating space. So I want to invite you to talk about maybe the top three toxic dating behaviors that you've seen over your dating life post divorce, and then we'll dive into them.
Sure. So I think it's important, um, I guess, to mention that this is coming not just from my own experience, but from working with single moms for several years. And I think there's like a certain type of wisdom and knowledge that comes from experience, and a certain type that comes from like working with a broader population and like putting stuff into practice in situations that aren't your own. And so I'm pulling from both of those right now. And I think the top crappy behaviors I see, um, not respecting consent, like just trampling over consent.
Yeah.
Yeah. Another one I'd say is getting upset with people for not meeting expectations that you have never communicated, nor had they ever agreed with. That's a huge one.
Hi, Clarissa. Still watching.
Hey, Clarissa. Um, God, I had one more and it's flashing out of my head.
Oh
It had
man.
to
We
do
were
with
just
the
talking about it. Yeah, yeah, not judging. So yeah, I think one of the most toxic behaviors is judging other people's desires and preferences. Like
yeah.
when they're not pushing it on you, just their desires and preferences.
Yeah, like this is the only way that things can be. And I think that all three of those are certainly pertinent in the conversation. And I don't know that I could specifically like put any kind of hierarchy in there. I think that in general, one of the things that has really transformed our relationship is this really open ability to communicate not only expectations or desires. Because like when we first met, and I before I even made my first trip out to New York, you were very, very clear. I don't want a long-term relationship or a long distance relationship with someone that's not a dynamic that's going to work for me. So from the get-go, you were very clear in
Look at me
communicating.
now.
What's that?
Look at me now.
Yeah, well, but I think here's the point, and it may sound kind of counterintuitive because she communicated that, and look at us now. But let's be clear on the things, and I'll let her speak to kind of how she saw this. We met in March, and we didn't decide to label anything until November, the end of November.
Yeah, so
In
March
there,
2023 to November 2024.
no, 2020, it was all in 2023. We're in 2024 now. It's not November yet.
Oh yeah.
You're
March
already planning
2023
our
to
1 year
November
anniversary.
2023.
That's sweet. Anyway, um, so in that time, we went into this communicating every day. We talked about the different things that we would need to see or feel or understand about each other in order for anything to be capable of developing. And then by the end of it, it was just like, okay, we just need to call this what it is because we were falling for each other from 2,000 miles away, and it didn't make sense to sit there and pretend like we weren't exclusive dating and looking at a long-term picture. So
Hmm.
does that about sum things up?
Yeah, pretty much. I think like a few times I've been asked the question from people who met someone far away, like, how did you make it work? And I'm like, I wasn't trying to make anything work. It's like when you meet a stranger who lives 2,000 miles away, it's probably not the best idea to think, huh, how do I build a future with this stranger who lives 2,000 miles away? Hey, Melissa. So it's in our case, it was just a matter of, hey, he's really awesome. Oh, he texted me again. I'll respond. And then we'd have these conversations and then it was like, oh, we're passionate about similar things. And we don't need quotation marks.
Sorry.
And
We
then
apologize for the disturbance.
and then and then we then it's like, oh, like if you want your kids to travel, if you've never left the Southwest, why don't you come to New York and I'd be happy to help you show them a big city. And then you came to New York and we hit it off and it was like, oh, that was really great. Maybe we'll get to see each other sometimes. Like
Yeah.
maybe we'll visit each other again. And then it was like after like 7 visits, it was like, all right, I think I see him more than any guy I've ever dated in New York. He takes care of me better than anyone else in the world. I think he's already my boyfriend. If I'm not gonna like if I'm being truthful, I feel like he's already my boyfriend. And so that's how it happened. It wasn't how can I make this long distance relationship work? It was like FML, how did I end up in a long distance relationship? There are like 4 million men in New York City. And I had to fall for the guy in Albuquerque. Not fair. I'm so glad. You're perfect. I love you.
Yeah, I love you too. I think that it's easy for things to develop in that space because one, both of us had very similar experiences in our marriage. So we've connected over nutrition, exercise, travel, divorce experiences, financial struggles, just a wide range of different things. So it's like we almost never have stuff that we can't talk about, including things like politics, which, as strange like everything would have it, I am centered more leaning right, and at bare minimum you're center leaning left. I don't know how where you feel like you belong on the
I
spectrum,
don't
but
I don't think I'm on the spectrum. I feel like I'm just all over the place, and I don't think there is a spectrum for me. But if there was a spectrum for me, it would be if I had to go somewhere on the spectrum, it would be pretty far left with little bits of conservatism sprinkled over the very far left.
so it wouldn't be something that most people would expect. And I think that the only way that a relationship between people who are that polar opposite, or at least mostly polar opposite, can exist is when you build everything on this super firm foundation of respect, which
I
leads
agree.
to the idea of consent. It's like, I'm not trying to specifically change your mind, but when we have conversations, we lead with compassion. We talk about things like what the experience for a person coming from this particular ideology would be when they experience the legal ramifications of a new law that's passed by an opposing party or something along those lines. We've talked about the Supreme Court cases, we've talked about all kinds of things. And even though we come from very, very different sides of it, we appreciate and understand that it's not just about how we feel about a particular topic. There are 300 and how many million other people in this country, including children. Like, there's a lot of different people that need to have their voices heard. And just because something works for me in Albuquerque, New Mexico, does not mean it's going to work for everybody in New York City. Usually it's quite the opposite. And I think that if I hadn't started traveling as much and I hadn't been able to immerse myself in the culture in New York and understand, I'm like, this is so different. Like in Albuquerque, it's sort of this general idea, like if you're walking down the street, whether you're at work or in the mall or like something along those lines, that you kind of split off and have these little quick, they're not long, but like, hey, what's up, how you doing, like you see someone that you recognize, or maybe you don't, but you're just like, hey, have a good day. That
I
does
love
not
this
happen.
story. Yeah, we're like walking through like our first 10 minutes in Manhattan or whatever. I'm a little bit ahead of you, walking down the street, and then you're like, "Are you do you not greet people in Manhattan? Or, like, are you not supposed to like I'm like, what? Are you not supposed to like say good morning or like say what's up to No. No, no, do not greet people walking down the streets of Manhattan. Don't do that. Like
Yeah. Yeah. So very, very interesting, and I think different perspectives, but I don't try to change your mind on things. I try to present the perspective that I see the world through, that window of the world, so that you can at least understand and appreciate why a law that might work in New York would be a terrible idea for Albuquerque, New Mexico, or Boise, Idaho, or any number of other random smaller town places where they don't have to deal with the same kind of things that a big city does. Um, so I think we had the consent part down pretty pretty well to begin with, and then
I mean
expect.
consent is I really want to make sure I drill down how normal it is for women to face issues with consent.
Oh no,
Like,
absolutely.
I mean, and I'm talking like um in intimate situations just being ignored when you're like, don't do that, and people just keep going and literally having to like stop people.
Someone just being
It's
in your face in general, like I need a bubble. Could you please not like stand that close to me or touching your hand or your hair or your back or any number of other just subtle things where it's like, no, really don't do that. I mean, for some people, it might be gray area, and for some people, it's like, absolutely not. Do not touch me unless I actually invite you or unless I, initiate contact, and there needs to be respect for
I mean, beyond that, it's like a very clear request. Like here is my boundary stated explicitly, and 15 minutes later, they are attempting to cross it. I mean, I'm being careful with my words given present company right now, but I mean like big deal situations, like here are my boundaries around my body and birth control and like source of MP, just flat out like ignoring and just doing what they like and literally having to be physically stopped.
Mark.
So when I say consent, yeah, it's little bits of consent, but it's also, yeah, I mean, it's like, first date kind of consent and getting on the same page and communication things, but it's also like, yeah, it's very, very like women, we have to deal with that all the time. And the amount of time men have acted like I was crazy for either like ending things when they didn't respect consent or um like for even just having boundaries is unbelievable.
Yeah, and I don't know exactly where that idea comes from, where men or males in general get the idea that if they want to touch you or communicate in a nonverbal way, that they expect you to let them. But I think, I hope that that time period where I don't even want to say that it was acceptable because it was allowed, but I don't want to say that it was ever something that should have been a way of life for those groups of people. Like, men were different back then, and um I mean, I'm sure that there's probably legislation on the books that allowed men to basically do anything that they wanted if you were married and there was no recourse period. Like, I don't specifically know. And I'm sure that I have people in my followers that could enlighten me on specific legislation that had to change or pass in different locales that can point to those different things, but it wouldn't surprise me at all to have those kinds of things in play where it was almost like, women couldn't have bank accounts or own real estate until I don't know what decade, but
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So yeah, consent is a big one, a very big one and it does go both ways. So while the egregious things I'm thinking of happen, tend to happen to women um by men, it there's also, other types of consent that women will often violate, right? Like so um I'm talking in generalizations right now because this is how it tends to happen, but it's not always gendered like this. But typical
hey, Eric, that
scenario,
sounds blocking out the volume. Like, we can't hear anything.
go play, bud.
Do what now?
Go play. Anything you want. Sure, sure. Go.
Are you sure? Yeah.
So um where was I? So consent, like a lot of women don't like when we state a boundary, say a physical boundary, like I am not going to do this on a first date, or I'm not comfortable with this tonight, or I need you to use this form of birth control, or anything like that. Um, mm, we don't like when that's not respected. Unfortunately, it's almost almost considered okay when men state boundaries like I'm not looking for a relationship, or I'm only looking for no strings attached, or um I don't feel like we're ready to progress this relationship yet. And women will push like, well, I need you to like I need to know when you're gonna be okay making me your girlfriend. Like I need like this needs to happen or I'm out. Whereas if a woman like if a man were to say, you don't put out, I'm out, all of a sudden he would be quite the jerk, you know? So I think consent goes both ways and it shows up in different ways. Um, it shows up in different ways, and unfortunately, a lot of the really egregious, dangerous stuff ends up happening to women. But I don't want to minimize the wide array of situations in which disrespecting consent shows up in the world.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that that particular part ties into the expectations bit as well, because in the dating world now, you have groups of people who feel more traditional. Hey, Jamie, um, who feel more traditional with their values, like the man should pay, regardless of whether the woman invited him out to the on the date or not, or things of that nature. And there are a lot of men out there who are, or throughout their experiences, have been so used and or mistreated for their financial stability that they're done with it. Like, I can't, that's a boundary for them now. It's like, I'm not going to put myself into a financially, troubling situation for a woman that either I'm not sure about or isn't giving me the clear signals communication wise that she's interested, wants to be exclusive with me, enjoys this, this dynamic that we have. And I think that all of it has to start with slowing things down a lot. I think that's one of the reasons that you and I were able to really build a lot of the different trust pieces to our relationship, was because one, we had no expectations to start with, and two, the conversations that we had, when we would have those conversations and then see the actions afterwards, everything was in alignment the whole way through. So it was like, speaking this, action here, speaking this, action here. You see the follow through, and that really um, does help build that solid foundation for anybody to be able to feel comfortable dedicating their time, energy, money, whatever it is, towards a relationship. I think people go so fast. I mean, one of the biggest things that I see in the divorce group is people that are on there, let's say they've been talking for 2 weeks, and then all of a sudden, like, they haven't even met in person yet, but they're expecting this super high level of communication from anybody that, like, they don't even really know anything about each other yet. Like, how much information from another person could you possibly have over texting within 2 weeks of random conversation?
Yes. Oh my God. Yeah, so this guy, like we met on this app and I really like I haven't heard from him in a couple days and like I'm really like anxious about it because he's perfect. And I'm like, "Oh, how long were you guys dating?" Well, like we hadn't met yet, but like we were chatting for 2 weeks and I'm just like okay, like nobody is perfect chatting or texting for 2 weeks. Nobody you could go on like how much do you know of that person? Like really, how much do you know of that? Like this is a big red flag for me, right? Like if someone thinks I'm perfect after like chatting or after a couple of dates, then that's telling me they're not looking for the depth of relationship that I value. You know what I mean? Like they might have a feeling like, I have a feeling about you. I feel this connection with you. I know this is going to go somewhere. Yeah, yeah, from just looking
Anyway,
at me on the internet. but like you don't know like how much do you know somebody in those like, and I'll ask like when I'm working with clients who are like struggling in a dating situation, a lot of times I've asked like, so like what percentage would you say you know this person? Now let's say there are some people like like it's impossible to know someone 100%, right? Like even the people you know best, they'll have their secrets, they'll have, stuff that you don't know about them or that you don't understand or
Yeah,
situations you
you're
haven't
not going to
experienced.
remember or tell someone what your birthday cake looked like when you were 6 years old, unless
Well,
there was some
not
traumatic
even
event.
that, but like,
There's so many things that you just like you can't express in a reasonable amount of time, even months or years. Like you're not going to know everything about a person, even if you've dedicated most of your life to them.
yeah, well, even like, let's say you're talking about like a sibling, someone you grew up with, where you really like know them on that level, there are going to be things you don't know about them. Like, you're not going to know what that person is like in the bedroom, I hope. But it's like, people like we all know because we've all had partners and we've seen them in the bedroom and then we've seen them outside the bedroom. We know people can be very, very different people in that setting. So you might have like your brother, your mother, your cousin, like whatever it is, and you know them. They are super close to you. You know them 80%, 90%. You don't know them 100%. So even taking that into account, right? So like we're not you don't have to know someone 100% to get into a relationship. That would be unrealistic. You probably only know someone 25% to getting into a relationship. And you probably know them like 70% when you get married. And then over a lifetime together, you make it towards like the 90% mark, you know? So it's
Yeah, your decades.
yeah, exactly. So like you're keeping that in mind. Okay, so you've been on a date and you think this person is perfect. Like how much do you actually know them? 1%, 1.5%. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
It's not much.
we had talked for 8 months before we met in person, and I would still say that realistically speaking, we probably only knew 5%.
Yeah, and I feel like this is I can't drill this in enough, just my own experience, but especially coaching other people and collaborating with people who specialize in dating and relationships. And one of the biggest things is this issue, right? Like people barely know each other and they're making decisions. Like for me, people see exclusivity differently. So I'm not saying everyone should approach this the way I do, but the way I see exclusivity, it's I feel like it's likely enough that you are the right person to me to the point that I'm willing to say no to all other opportunities and pour my energy into you. How well do I have to know someone to be like, I am confident, I'm pretty confident that you are better for me than every other human on this planet. Like that doesn't come on that doesn't come on a first date or a second date. That comes after months. And even then, a lot of like, they call it the one for a reason. Like most of the people you date are not going to be the one. So
Yeah,
even then, we're usually wrong. So for me, I think slowing things down it isn't something to do artificially. It's not something to force yourself to slow it down. If you're genuinely reflecting on the reality of the situation instead of your hopes and fantasies about the situation, it happens naturally because like when we met in person, very much, and our audience knows you were a random guy from the internet. You seemed awesome. We had all these conversations and I was like glad to meet you, but until we like met in person, you were a random guy from the internet. Like for all I know, I would have met you and it would have been like, "Oh my God, I can't spend more than 5 minutes with this person." Or I would have seen behavior that would have been completely alarming. We talked enough where I felt confident like inviting you to meet up, but you're it was like I was very realistic about how much I did not know you at that point.
You
And then
were.
that's why things progressed so slowly.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things because, what you were talking about was you needed to be able to see a long-term future, a solid like opportunity for a long-term future before doing anything that would require exclusivity because like what does that mean? Like you're not prepared to give up dating anybody else until you have an idea that this is going to be it, because we don't get time back. Nobody just gets a deposit of time. I mean, minus very, very few things like organ donation, um, where you get an extra little bit of time that you wouldn't have normally otherwise had. But every minute, every day, every year is valuable. And in dating, especially when it comes to trying to find your person, taking your time gives you the processing ability when it comes to like, okay, what do I feel like I just saw, especially if something makes you nervous or anxious about the other person, being able to step back and say, hey, I'm really not sure how I feel about how this went down, and I need to process where I'm at with it. Just
Mhm.
to be able to communicate, needing some space, trying to figure it out, and not projecting you did this wrong, you made me mad, any number of these other things towards that situation. Because like for myself, until I've actually dug down into why am I having this bodily reaction, I know these things are true and my body is reacting counter to all of that. So I need to figure out why, and I'm not going to blame the other person for something until I figure out why this doesn't fit. And when I figure it out, or when I believe I figure it out, then I present that information as I felt this way when this happened, versus you did this and you hurt my feelings and you like all this other stuff. There's a way to communicate those things that isn't accusatory or aggressive and of that nature. Especially going back to the point where, if an expectation has not been communicated at all, or one party feels like they have adequately expressed the expectation and it wasn't received by the other person in the same way that they were attempting to, there needs to be some grace and understanding there. It's like, look, this person that I trusted myself enough to enter into this dating relationship or exclusive relationship with just missed the boat on what my expectations were. Did I not explain this well enough? Did I miss being able to communicate to my partner what the expectation that I had was? Or is this a really big problem that there's too much of a misalignment that like we can't recover from? Because I mean, could be anything. Um, Typically it comes, I mean, I've seen, I don't know how many posts in the divorce group where it's about friends or family and how they communicate to the partner, whether it's in a healthy way or not. Um, picking on them when they're really not, like they don't know each other well enough to be able to have that kind of rapport and relationship. Um, what stuff like that have you seen, and as far as like how that part of the dynamic, like if a partner expects that they are going to be defended by the other person within their friends or within their circle, and that doesn't happen, or something to that effect.
Hmm.
Have you seen that?
Not so much myself. Thankfully, I haven't really had to deal with that. Um, with other people, it can come up. And yeah, I think in general, I think if you're inviting someone into a situation, it's a good idea to be a little bit protective of them, you know?
Yeah.
Um, like if I invite someone into a situation, I want to make sure they're having a good time and they're comfortable and stuff like that. Um, I can understand there are some cultural differences about, for example, how much you defer to elders or how much you do or do not speak up, or challenge an elder. So I don't want to give a blanket statement around something like this. But I feel like there definitely should be some care given and I think in general be some respect if you're going into someone else's space, you know? Um, and then if there's a misalignment there, I know it can be pretty painful, you know? If, you know, like if someone's not respecting your spouse or if your spouse's family isn't respecting you, it, it's reasonable to have boundaries around that and to
Yeah.
not keep putting yourself in that situation, and it's really painful when that happens. Um, so yeah, it's hard to give a blanket statement around something like that because there are so many factors that come into play.
Yeah. I think that, I mean, it's hard, and that's just one example of how like a misalignment within expectations can present, whether it's with friends or family or anything along those lines. But let me see here. Do you have any other things that you can think of as far as misalignment of expectations that come to
Oh,
mind?
so many. I mean, people expect that other people are going to date the way they do. So whether that's exclusive or not exclusive or um
Hey, Amber.
monogamous or poly, or I mean it's just like the speed at which people move, it's just like way too many times I see people getting upset because somebody else isn't following their script when they haven't taken the time to communicate what they desire and what their expectations are and given the person the chance to either say yes I'm in or actually I can't provide that. I wish you the best.
Yeah, I mean that kind of on some levels feeds into the live we did last week or earlier this week, I guess it was Wednesday, about that sort of dominant leadership type role for one partner and then a more submissive or following type role for another. There are healthy ways to communicate those expectations, and then there are very toxic ways that people choose to communicate those expectations. And unfortunately, um, at least in the circles that I've seen more recently, the way that it gets communicated is from a male perspective who is missing the boat
I mean,
significantly.
I've seen it all around, you know, I've seen it all around. Like it, working with a lot of single moms, I've seen a bit more from the female perspective on this matter, at least. But with things like getting upset with men for, like stringing them along, it's like, did you like what was the conversation like when you talked about what you were looking for, you know? Um, don't get me wrong, I absolutely know that there are plenty of cases where a woman says, right now I'm open to something that has the potential to turn into a serious relationship, and a guy just doesn't respect that. Um, but there are a lot of times where it's just assumed that, well, of course you're supposed to. or if somebody has different expectations around sexuality or lifestyles or anything like that, where they're judged, where there's this condescending attitude towards it. And I think the the correct response when someone communicates something like that is, thank you for sharing that with me. And then either, yes, that's an alignment for me. I'm in on that, or that's a possibility for me, or I'm not sure about that. I'm willing to see how it goes, or actually that's not what I'm looking for. I thank you for sharing it with me and for being honest. Thank them for their honesty and wish them the best. Like, it's very simple. You don't have to
Yeah.
judge. And I've had people tell me some desires that were very much outside of what I was looking for, like on the opposite extreme. And it's and I think there are some desires that are considered acceptable in our society and some that aren't. And that's a problem. Like, I can say from a woman's perspective, if we are able to respond to desires in a non-judgmental way, it creates a much better experience with men. Because I can tell you that, well, and this isn't about like catering to what men want or being what men want. Like this, it has to be genuine. But what I'm saying is, when a man feels like he can be honest about what he wants and what he's pursuing, then it makes it easy for him to find the person who's the right match. And it makes it easy for you to avoid him if he's not the right match. Whereas if we say that certain desires aren't okay, say certain sexual desires, or someone who only wants no strings attached, or whatever it is that society has deemed is less okay, then I want marriage, 2.5 kids, and a dog and a white picket fence. Right.
Yeah.
So if if he can express those desires up front, then you're not going to waste each other's time, right? Like, if he can say that honestly, then I was just like, oh, you know what? That's actually not what I'm looking for. Thank you so much for telling me. And I really hope you find that fun, amazing connection that you're looking for. Like, I want that for you, and genuinely mean it.
Yeah. I
Like,
mean,
I want you to find that person who will do that thing that you've always fantasized about in that situation. And like, I want that for you. I'm not it, but I want like having that genuine attitude. I think, I don't know. I feel like I had an overall very positive dating experience because of things like that. Because if a guy told me what he was available for or not available for, I believed him and I took that seriously as a boundary, instead of thinking, but we have a connection. I can tell that he really like does want a relationship with me. That's like, but we have a connection. I could tell she really did want me to sleep with her. Like, not okay, people, not okay. you know? Um, yeah. Does that make sense?
yeah, no, it makes perfect sense. And I think that in our culture today, there are people who are okay with premarital interactions, and there are some that are absolutely not. And then there are some that are more situational. And if they are, and they meet someone who isn't, having that, oh, you do those things, and getting, anger, judgment, any number of those other like negative things, like, even for someone who is really comfortable in their desires and everything else, it can like throw you off a little bit. You come off your center a little bit. You're like, wow, that was a really aggressive response to a very simple statement. I didn't say that you had to do this. I said I like this, or I want this. And it's very easy to just communicate, hey, I'm not interested in a relationship that involves this type of interaction. Thank you for your
Yeah.
time. Like, I'm happy that you shared that with me. I would love to buy this meal just to show my gratitude or whatever that particular thing is, but this is definitely not going to move forward. those clear communications and easily set expectations, and on top of that, the respectful respectful communication regarding the desires or preferences that they have. I don't think that the world is in a place, at least at this particular time, where things like premarital sex are going to go away. Um, I'd be shocked, but that doesn't mean that everyone needs to be okay with it. It doesn't mean that everyone needs to participate in it. It doesn't mean that you need to judge those who do versus being, just different about the others. Um,
Or who
because
don't.
it doesn't hurt you. Like, it's not an attack towards you, no matter what your faith is, no matter what any perspective that you come from. It doesn't cost you anything to just be polite. Now, you may be shocked because they want to do something that involves stuff you've never even heard of, and you're just like, I'm gonna have to Google this first. Hold on, let me look this up.
Oh my God, yes. Yes, if you're new to dating in this day and age, if you're not used to it, and there's all these acronyms in the dating profiles, go to urbandictionary.com. I'm just gonna leave it there.
But be very well aware that you will probably be exposed to something that may turn your stomach. I don't know what your
Don't go to
background is like.
urbandictionary.com when your kids are looking at the screen or your grandma's looking at the screen. Just like
You might want to
just
go into incognito mode so that it doesn't really warp your other search, other things.
but
Um,
yes,
because in our
you
divorce group,
know,
I've seen some stuff and I'm just like,
I've
definitely
had
not,
to look stuff up.
definitely not my cup of tea. I'm
I'm
glad that
definitely
I'm glad that you communicated this is your interest. Ouch.
yeah, I've
I am not
definitely had to look
interested in
stuff
bear
up.
traps.
I don't even know what that means in Urban Dictionary.
I don't think it specifically means anything, but there was one that was talking about like needing kink in their life or something to that effect, and judging people for being vanilla, and said it's not my fault that you need to be punched in the face and step in a bear trap in order to enjoy yourself.
It's so true. It's like there's so many judgments. It's like first of all, even what people mean by kink. It's like for some people, it's like like I don't know. It's like there are things that some people consider kink that other people consider vanilla. It's just there's no agreement on any of this stuff.
Yeah,
And
no, it's a
literally,
huge.
yeah, and literally it's just like, what does that mean to you? What are you looking for? And oh, here's one. If if you have like say very like specific sexual desires, it's like, well, do you say that on the first date? Here's one. Here are some ways you can communicate that. I'm looking for someone with sexual compatibility. And allow them to decide if they would like you to elaborate that on or not. But you've expressed that you value sexual compatibility. And they can be like, what does that mean to you? Or they could be like, not just moving on to the next topic. And but like this way you're not like being rude by talking about something that's not okay to talk about on the first date because that's another boundary different people have.
Yeah, a lot of people. I mean, I whew, can't tell you how many posts I've seen in the divorce group that go into that stuff, and it's like either within 3 messages or before the third date, they are asking for pictures or trying to, send specific kinds of text messages back and forth or any number of these other things. And it's like, we haven't even met in person yet. Can
And
we?
and like you know what? Some people like that. So that's totally fine. And like that's the thing, right? Like
Well, there's the
men
two things. There's the expectation and
mhm,
the communication of boundaries. Like, that needs to be at the forefront.
exactly. So keep in mind like for anything I'm going to just say this from the woman's point of view. I'm sure it applies more broadly. But like for anything like as a woman, keep in mind whatever a man does or sends you, it's probably because he's dated women who thought it was really hot. And so, like, whatever it is, like, there is someone out there who likes it exactly that way. And guys will have no idea what you like if you don't communicate it. And so there are ways to, like, for sometimes it's just very clear from what they do that, like, it's not a good match, and you don't have to be like, oh my god, why would you, like, again, like, you, these conversations hadn't happened. Sometimes it's blatant, like,
Mhm.
guy just sends you an explicit photo after you've been chatting for 4 minutes. By all means, block him. No explanation, no respect needed. Just forget it. Ignore his existence. But, like, in other cases, like, you might be talking, maybe the conversation gets flirtatious, and then, like, he says something that to you crosses a line. It doesn't mean he's a there's it's not good, it's not bad. It's, like, very simple to just be like, I would like to keep this conversation within these parameters for now. You know? And if it feels bad for you, maybe you decide it's not a match, and that's totally okay, but that doesn't mean that there's something wrong with that person.
Yeah, I
And
think
the
that
opposite
there's
too.
always a need and an ability for that just clear, respectful communication because you don't gain anything by trashing someone's preferences. It doesn't
Mhm.
help any particular situation. And while you may be shocked or, whatever, by their expression of that, being able to say, okay, whew, that hit me. Like it made me feel very nervous, very whatever. That's really not the direction that I want this to go in right now. So, you either shut off communication and say, I'm really not looking for that right now. Thank you for your time. Or I'd like to wait a little bit more time to get to know you before we get into that, or something like it doesn't have to be, oh my God, you're a pervert, or like any of those negative, like, terminology that gets thrown around all the time. Now, granted, for some people, that may fit the exact definition of what they feel like is going on, but that doesn't mean that it was intended that way. Some people are just way more open about their preferences and or desires than other people.
Yeah. Um, and I think it's important to bring up too that being too conservative is also stigmatized, right?
Too
Not
vanilla, too
wanting
shy, too whatever.
not wanting to have sex until marriage, or like, there are people who will talk down about that, or not, whatever, like holding off, like being abstinent for until certain conditions are met, or, and like that 100% needs to be respected too. There is no
Yeah.
right or wrong around that. Like, it's literally, like, if someone comes to you with anything from, like, their preferences being asexuality to the wildest stuff you've ever dreamed of in your life, from the most liberal, like, exploration, like, hedonistic lifestyle, to the most conservative, like, I abstinence all the way, like, any of those, like, we let's just respect it. Like,
If it's not a match, then it's not a match. Thank you for your time. Move on.
exactly. You can have any preferences you want, and that has nothing to do with judging other people. And that's where, like, another thing, people be like, well, no, I'm not, like, judging you. That's just my preference. I want, like, a good woman. And you're like, well, that's that's judgmental right there. Like, I want a good, submissive housewife. And you're like, okay, like, make sure you actually remove the judgment from it, you know? Like, well, to each their own, but, like, I want, like, like a masculine man. Like, what the not okay, people, not okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think that if that's something that you're looking for, then describe the specific traits from them that you're looking for. I would like someone who's a good leader. I would like someone who knows their way around a car or can fix things or stuff along those lines. What those specific traits mean to you, because I know plenty of men who have a wide variety of skills that are so significantly different from mine that does not make them more or less masculine, male, dominant, whatever than any of my other friends. I know people who've built wooden cranes with their bare hands. I know people who could probably kill you with two fingers, um, because they're that deep into martial arts and some other things, but they don't know how to fix a car. They don't know how to, hike in the wilderness or build a campfire, but that, like, it doesn't mean that they're more or less masculine or like whatever. Like, those things, like, if your expectation is that you want to date, or like that's what you're looking for, then communicate those specific things. I'm looking for a man who knows how to fix a car because this is valuable to me. I'm looking for a man who knows how to this because that is where I find value. I'm looking for a woman who is a wonderful, nurturing, beautiful, talented person in this field, this field, this field because it complements me, or something along those lines. Not, I want a submissive woman who's going to listen to everything that I tell her to do and do it as I say.
Yeah, for more information on that, watch our previous live on men who want a submissive woman.
No, I don't want a submissive woman. I want a woman who is strong in her own right, who recognizes that we have compatibility across multiple fields, but is still comfortable with letting me lead in most of the things that I actually should be leading in because I have those skills. Don't ask me to choose the color of the paint in the house specifically and know what all the different shades of gray are, or pink or red or anything else, because I have an 8 color wheel. But if you need me to change your brakes or build a house or um reorganize your finances, I can do all those things with my eyes closed.
You can. It's very nice. I enjoy it. Yeah. And personally, I love the leadership style that I compare to like the CEO, like the person who can lead without always having to be in charge of everything, but can be like, "Hey, you're the right person to be in charge of this. I'm going to need you to step up now and do this thing you're great at." Like I love that kind of leadership. Which is one of the things that I enjoy about our relationship because you enjoy leading and then there are times when you're like, I need you to do this thing. I'm like, yes, sir.
Yes, I'm in need of this particular part of your trait portfolio. Please bring it out.
Yeah, yeah, it's nice.
Yeah.
So we talked about consent, we talked about judging preferences, and
Yeah.
we have talked about expectations too.
Yeah, I think that it's important to come back to that post from Kevin's that we talked about earlier.
Mm.
Kevin is a coach that I worked with, and it ties into kind of all of the different things. One of the parts is like, why is he not texting me? 3 reasons why explained here. Uh, Not enough time has passed. On average, it takes longer to process emotions for men than women. It is reasonable to expect 24 to 72 hours for him to really connect with the attraction. This is assuming a lot of different things. One, you actually have a lot of compatibility. If there's a severe misalignment that's very, very clear early on, he's probably not doing that in the same way that Kevin's expressing in this particular way. But if he's a centered, respectful man, he would be communicating that pretty quickly. If it's a no, it realistically is probably going to be communicated quickly. If it's a yes or a maybe, it may take some time to process that. And like, would you specifically kind of agree to that, or how would you put your female
My
friend?
experience, in my experience, most men, when they didn't feel that it was a match or they didn't feel like things were going to progress, just ghosted. I can't think of a single one breaking things off, like actually breaking things off. of all the men. Like it just ghosted.
Yeah. It's interesting because I don't
Excuse me.
know where it comes from. I know that there's a lot of people who get very, very triggered by something along those lines, but back to sort of like ground rule expectations, less than 5 dates, less than, I don't know how many months you would have to communicate with someone before there should be any kind of expectation that you're going to continue to talk. I mean,
I don't.
lots of space there in a gray area. Like if you're expecting for a person that you have known, let's say even less than a year, to respond, like I have friends that I've had since high school who I've gone like a couple of months that they didn't even realize that I sent them a message. And they're like, oh my God, I've completely like I don't know how I missed this. Then you pick up on the conversation. I mean, dating is obviously a little bit different, especially if you're on a dating app, because you assume that the person is actively looking for something, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's not going to be casual, whether that's with or without um, certain consensual activities being present. In my particular case, when I say casual dating, it doesn't specifically mean that it includes those activities. When I was casually dating before we met in person, it was strictly like just meeting people and talking to them and seeing if there was any kind of connection to start with that was worth pursuing. And then I met this wonderful woman in front of me. So just shut that right down.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, it's one of those things where I think there's got to be sort of an understanding that unless you communicate something, don't assume that they're going to think the way that you do, or that your expectations are going to be the same in any way, shape, or form. Because just because I mean, you come from the same religion, you come from different religions, you could come from the same, socioeconomic, political backgrounds, like anything else. Nothing is guaranteed to be the way you think it is unless you communicate it or with the other person. And on top of that communication, you see the actions that follow it up. Because if you don't see that, then I mean, until you see that loop continuing to evolve and connect itself, they said this, they did this, they said that, they did that, they did this, and like you just keep kind of revolving that thing around. That's what builds trust and that expectation that they're not just going to disappear, at least hopefully.
Yes. Oh my God, like perfectly said. Like for me, it's so important to actually see certain things for myself on a consistent basis before progressing a relationship, whether it's progressing to exclusivity or progressing to engagement or to marriage. Like there are certain things I need to see for myself, not their account of it, not their point of view of it. I need to see it and experience it for myself and decide what I think and feel about it before I know if things can progress. And that's another reason. It's like I don't I was never exclusive after 3 dates. I wasn't playing hard to get. There were no games. It felt inauthentic to me. It was just
Yeah.
not real.
I can't imagine what I would need, or what you would need to see, what conversations you would need to have, and like everything else, because that's such a short amount of time to have developed a significant level of trust to know what to expect from someone. Like that level of trust I don't think can be built in just a few dates or even in a few months. um I mean, for us, I feel like we really got a pretty decent idea around 5 months, um, somewhere in that ballpark, because we'd gone through um, us meeting and then the kids all getting together. And obviously, that first time that we had all the kids together, we didn't have the greatest experience. But through the communication and through like using the tools that each of us learned after our divorce and through therapies and coaching and like all these other things, we kind of regathered the different parts and realigned like what we thought was where, and really just had a big time status update like, hey, where do you feel like this is at?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
then
We-
we kind of walked on into, you know, where we are now, which I mean it took, what did I say, 8 months. It was about a little over 8 months before we decided to label what it was. And
yeah, 8 months after we met in person.
yeah, in person we'd known each other for like a year and a half, or
Hmm.
like known of each other for a year and a half.
Yeah, I think our first conversation online was what, June of 22?
Yeah,
And then we met in person March of 23. And then we made our relationship official November of 23.
yeah, lots of time.
Hmm.
Granted, I think it could have gone faster, obviously, if we lived near each other, but
Yeah.
I think what we kind of dedicate towards the um you know, the required slowness, not that either one of us really necessarily wanted it, but you were talking about for a while that you valued how slow we had to go because it gave us this better opportunity to really dig into each other and see the longer term picture of what all the things could look like, because what we're talking about doing is not small.
Yeah, well also I think um like I just in general notice the opportunities in any situation and try to take full advantage of them. And so the opportunity that came in us going slow was like this like super long honeymoon phase because it's just it you're not in the situations that tend to cause conflict, you know? Like they're just not in them as often. And so it's something I'm really aware of too. And we've talked about this when, like we have this level of closeness and this level of depth that normally wouldn't be achieved after the short amount of time we've been in a relationship. But because we knew each other so long before, and because of how things progress so slowly, we have this depth. And then at the same time, when we are in the same city and, when we move in together, there are going to be these things that are almost like out of sync where normally in a relationship certain things happen at the beginning, certain things happen after say a year, certain things happen after 2 years. It's like in some places we're going to be at like the 2 year mark, and in other places we're going to be at like the 3 week mark, and so it's going to be kind of weird. But it's something that I've been really mindful of, as like communicating certain things like that to you, like when I notice something where I'm like, oh hey, just to flag for you, I've noticed that we live differently in this way, or we handle situations like this differently, or whatever it is. So it's hopefully not quite as much of a shock.
Yeah, I mean, I'm confident that we'll, you know, reasonably be able to handle things that come our way because we've had had some extensive practice with it.
Yes.
Um, the other part to that post, so like for instance, ladies, if you are looking for a man that is driven and very um passionate about the work that they do, whether it's a career or a side business or entrepreneurship or like whatever, keep in mind that that can take more time than you would expect it to build and create and nurture. And for some people, I think that you can relate to this, Nicole, that for some people, multitasking and being able to jump in and out of tasks quickly is an efficient process, and for some people it's really not. And in order for a person of that nature to be able to like focus on their work and be able to do it effectively, while they may have moments of downtime in their day where they choose to go to the bathroom or have something to eat or something along those lines, that doesn't mean that they want to open a conversation with someone that they know that they should dedicate extra time to or for, because it's going to take away from their ability to re-engage in their work, and or they don't want to leave the person feeling like they can't dedicate their full attention to them. And that's one of the things that it talks about. He may actually be as busy as he's talking about being, and it's necessary to be respectful that, like, for instance, for you, you're not a multitasker. If you have to jump out of something and try to come back into it, one, the longer it's been, or two, the farther away from what task you were on the thought process was, the longer it can take you to come back and figure out where you were and where you left off. It's kind of like with me, there are certain things when I'm like working on the trailer and doing some kind of construction work, I have numbers in my head on what the measurements need to be for this piece or that piece or something else. And if I take 5 or 10 minutes to go get the kids food, I may or may not accurately remember that. And then I have to go measure this, and then I have to recheck that. And then I have to go back and find where this was. And by that time, I've forgot my saw, drill, or nail gun in another room, and I have to go get it. And like all those different pieces, while my brain is capable of going back and forth, it would have been far more efficient. And I recognize that had I just taken care of that extra 5 minute task and then diverted my attention towards something else.
Yeah, in general, people have different communication styles, and to assume that um how often someone texts you throughout the day is an indicator of interest. Um, I mean, I noticed this, it didn't take me that long to figure this out, dating as a single mom, that if it was easy to schedule a date with somebody, they probably weren't husband material. Because it was just like, that's what I noticed. It's like I ended up on lots of dates with like people who, were like chronically unemployed and not very, like, there's nothing wrong. People end up unemployed at times. Like, I'm not judging that, but I'm talking about, like, the type of person who wasn't really at a point where they were looking to set themselves up to be able to take care of a family. And
Not in a
because,
career space. They were jumping from job to job, or, I mean,
yeah,
it's
or like, you find out they're like the moved back in with their parents, or like things like that. And it was just like I realized that when I met someone who was like, oh, like this is like a serious, like, candidate who could be a good match. It was like, all right, so are you free Monday? No, no, I got the kids game on Monday. How about Friday? Oh no, Friday I have my son for the weekend. We have something planned. Okay, what about January 17th, 2029? It was like
yeah, yeah, the goals, the plans, the I mean, I think that kind of channels into some kind of leadership portion. Is like they're not someone who's just flying by the seat of their pants the whole time. They have a vision and a purpose and a plan for all of those things, and they are in the process of enacting each one of those things as a goal, so that they can have the life that they want. That's, if that's something that you want, if that's an expectation for your partner, then you have to understand what that's going to likely come with. And more likely than not, like, I would imagine that even like Elon Musk's inner circle of people probably don't have any better communication with him than most of his employees. Like, there's so much taxation on their time, in terms of what it requires. Like, there's probably, like, if there's a problem within one of the plants, he is dedicating sleepless nights and who knows how much other extra time towards solving that problem, even if a bunch of other things are going on. Granted, he's probably got the money to pay for nannies and delivery this and everything else that, and that's a interesting different type of story. But if you're looking for someone who is that driven and wanting to build that kind of life for themselves, it's going to come at the cost of certain things, like their ability to effectively communicate quickly on the timeline, so your expectations have to be kind of tempered for that.
Yeah, and I think if you're looking for an adult, it's not reasonable to expect them to communicate throughout the day, all day, every day. Like that's not reasonable to expect, Like think about it. Do you really want to date someone who's like, yeah, I'm having quality time with my kid and nonstop texting you? It's like, so are you really having quality time with your kids? Like,
What does
it's
quality
like
time mean to you?
exactly, it's like I feel like if someone's always available, I'm kind of wondering what's going on here, Like I would be curious. I think like you said, some people are natural multitaskers. So it's not a snap judgment, but I would be curious to know what's going on there. Um yeah, I think if you have responsibilities, for most people, if they have responsibilities and they're like putting like the energy into taking care of them diligently, they're not going to be texting all day,
Yeah, I think
And
that
again,
some of
that's
that
not true for
is
everyone because
more of
like
a
I feel like I text more than most people because texting is part of my job. So like when I'm getting requests and having conversations, I'm doing a lot of stuff by text and social media. And so one comes in from you, one comes in from family or whatever. A lot of times it's not as big a deal for me to text back. But when I'm not doing that kind of work, it's the complete opposite. It totally
Mhm.
derails me if I'm paying attention to my texts like that.
Yeah, I think everybody's a little bit different in how they handle that, and without going into it with the expectation that it's going to happen, there needs to be some kind of conversation about it, especially if you're a person who really values that consistent communication. One, I can say from my own personal experience, that I would more than likely tie that to an anxious attachment situation where you're not feeling secure in some part of that environment because you're not getting that consistent feedback, and or there hasn't been that foundation of trust built.
Hmm.
Because if you trust that you are valuing this person and they value you and that you're building something bigger than what you may have ever done in the past, then that is going to be part of like the expectation that you develop, that they're going to be in meetings, in and out of meetings every 30 minutes or like whatever throughout the entire day. And while they may go to the bathroom, maybe they just need to clear their mind for 5 minutes, and not like there shouldn't be necessarily, unless it's communicated, the expectation that every single break from work you're going to communicate with me.
Oh,
There's a problem.
that would be so controlling and overbearing to expect that of somebody. Like again, everyone's different, and for some people that's how they're naturally going to be, and that's awesome. And if you're only compatible with people who are like that, okay, like I respect that. But to like expect that of people or be upset, it's whew, that
without
is that
without
is a
communicating,
whole
or that being the only way that you can function, there's probably something deeper there. That like I've had interactions with people myself where they asked for space, and because of the situation that I was in mentally, I was just like, what does that mean? What does space mean? Like, I don't understand, like, what I'm supposed to do now. Live your life. Like, live your life. You have all these other responsibilities. You don't need to be on your phone texting this person when they, ask for space. Maybe it isn't a good sign. Maybe they're stepping back to think because you need this level of communication that it's just not in alignment for you. And you may get bad news, but sitting there and being anxious and pestering them, or like all those other things, is certainly not going to change the dynamic or the conversation there to something that can be rebuilt, you know.
yeah, I think someone's behavior says a lot. And I think especially at the beginning stages, like if you've known someone for a week and you're trying to figure out how to make it work, you probably don't have something worth making work, you know? Um, it's like, I feel like for compatibility, like if you're already blatantly incompatible in the first week, that is not a good sign. You know?
Yeah,
And so
and
it's not like the person is bad or not worth it, or it's not that at all. But like if it's if it's not like pretty effortless in the first few weeks, that's probably not a good sign. Communication, yes. Someone can't read your mind. And so things like, I really love it when I get texts throughout the day from the person I'm dating. It lights me up, it puts a smile on my face, it makes me feel valued. Communicating like that and then leave it alone and see what happens. And that tells you what you need to know.
yep,
Not like, well, I told you I like to be texted a lot throughout the day. I didn't hear from you since 4 o'clock.
it's 5:30.
I mean,
Yeah,
honestly, anyone who's like, I feel like anyone who's watching this from my page doesn't need to hear half of this.
yeah, probably
There's like
not.
value,
I
like
honestly, I don't
quality,
feel
high
like
value human beings. But yeah, like it's pretty obvious. It's like state your preferences and what you like. If you feel something, right? Like if let's say you feel a spark, but the behavior just isn't really like hitting you the right way, state what you like, state what you enjoy, and then you get to find out if what you like and what you enjoy are important to this person. And that's it. There's no trying to make it work at that stage. It's like
yeah, I
I
think
said I enjoy this. He continued doing the opposite. I can see we're not a good match. No drama,
yeah,
no
it doesn't
no
matter how hot
anger,
they
no
are. It doesn't
resentment,
matter.
no bitterness. No, there are no good men out there. Just, oh, we're not a good match.
Or women. There's plenty of wonderful women out there, and looking at the world as if the other gender or whoever you prefer to date, whichever group you prefer to date, is not acceptable or compatible or like whatever as a giant, humongous group. Like
Take a shower,
there's
buddy.
8 billion people in the world. You can date roughly half of them, depending on your preferences. The statistical probability of there not being any good human beings in that number is astronomical.
Yeah, there are so many, bless you, bud. There are so many wonderful men and women out there. And no, they're not all taken. Because, like, that's the thing that gets me. It's like there are no good men out there. And it's like, so they're all taken. All the good ones are taken. And it's like, but you're single. Like that was the thing. Like how could I say all the good men are taken when I was single? Because then by logic, if I were good, I would be taken. So then I suck too? I mean, maybe I do. I don't know. That's up to everyone else to decide. I'm sure some of you think I'm suck. Some of you think I suck. I'm sure some of you think I'm perfectly, okay, or you great or whatever. Like, but that logic is just no, no, and it's not going to get you anywhere because think about it. When you're on a date, people can kind of like, we can sense, humans can sense each other's, vibe. And if you're on a date all defensive, like, let me just wait and see if he's going to be an asshole. Like, it's
And
just,
you're looking for every single way he could be an asshole.
and not only that, but you're probably not being open and friendly, and like there's probably like a guardedness that
Body language is going to show.
exactly. Yeah, people can feel it. And so if your expectation is that if your expectation when you go on a date is that the person you're on a date with is going to be like awful and you're just looking out for it, you're
Or
probably not going
hurt
to be the
you or take advantage of you, and it doesn't matter. Notice, like, what we're trying to kind of discuss here isn't around gender, isn't around a toxic male figure or a female figure, or wherever you feel like you fit in between. It's a good human that is a match versus a human that isn't a match. That's it. Like,
yeah.
I don't believe that specifically men are more toxic than women. I think that in the ways we communicate it, it's construed that way sometimes. I think that in general, men have a lot more work to do on our emotional intelligence and things of that nature to be able to get out of our heads and appreciate what's actually there. Because I don't know that if I had not gone through the things that I went through and done the work that I did, that you and I would have ever connected. And I think that one of the main reasons that we are so compatible is how we approach things and how we develop those tools separately, so that when we came together and recognized what we had here, it was just like, yes, absolutely yes.
Hmm.
That was it. There it is right there.
Yeah.
Everything
Yeah,
else, like
totally.
I told you, the woman that I went on a couple of dates with before we ended up meeting, there's nothing wrong with her. Absolutely not. She's a wonderful person. We went on 2 dates. There was just something that I could like, there was a missing part of like that vibe or energy or whatever it is that you want to talk about. It's just like I'm in this place where I'm really looking to like stretch my wings, and I want to do this and this and this, and every time I lead a conversation in that direction, it's like nobody's home.
Mm.
And that's okay. She's still a wonderful person. She's just not my wonderful person.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that like that attitude's great, you know? And when people feel that, I think it tends to draw people in more,
Yeah,
you
the
know?
open
And
invitingness. I think that's one of the main things about how you operate in general. That's just the most wonderful, inviting presence that I've ever seen.
thank you.
It's like very, very rarely have I ever felt like when I communicated something that I was being judged for, either a preference or the way I communicated something or like anything else. And the times when I have felt that way, it was usually me. There was usually a, why am I feeling this way? This is not the pattern that we have developed. So I'm going to question why I'm sensing this, not question my partner until I've really dove down and figured out why, so that I can communicate it, and then we can move on from there and figure things out. Because doing the work, being able to communicate in a healthy way, being able to complement each other, and I mean like personality styles and the way you handle different things, um, strengths and weaknesses, are all huge pieces of what that picture is going to look like in a dating relationship. Whether
Mhm.
it's exclusive or not, there are, I mean, what is it? eHarmony's, is it 27 or however many dimensions of compatibility they talk about, where I think that they missed the mark. I think it's deeper than that. There's probably thousands. Um, but in order to really know and understand whether or not it's something that can work, like there's a whole list of check boxes. And I don't specifically like to use that because it kind of reduces things down to like it's inhumane almost, like it doesn't make
You,
sense.
you know my philosophy on checklists.
What's that?
You know my philosophy on checklists as it comes to dating.
Yes,
I've made
there's
spoofs
only
about
two of them.
checklists. Yeah, I've literally made spoofs about like being on a date and it's like, "Hi, are you my husband? Let's find out." Okay, number 1, check. Number 2 is like, no one wants to be on a date with that.
Yeah.
Bad
I mean, you
idea.
could do it
Don't get me wrong.
mentally, but
Having
like, you know,
standards. Sorry, go ahead.
I'm just thinking in general, like the way that people approach things in that way, I think that it can be helpful for some people, but it not only needs to be like this active, fluid kind of situation where you've got all these things that you're absolutely looking for that you would love to have, and then you've got the absolutely not deal breakers.
Hmm.
And see which one of them gets, you know, hit first, because I mean any number of those deal breakers could break things off really really quickly, but listen to your deal breaker, and if they want something or don't want something that you want, or like however that specifically works for you, listen to it.
Oh yeah,
Just because you've
100%.
invested 6 months into someone does not mean that you have to try to bend your rules or your boundaries or your any number of other things to make it work. You learned so much about yourself, hopefully, in those 6 months, and you can take that into the next relationship, but you don't have to keep trying to make it work when it's obviously not going to. And you don't have to be mad at the other person for not being the match. Unless they
Hmm.
have lied to you about who they are, like blatantly lied about who they are, or maybe they were, you know, the expectations of exclusivity were broken or something to that effect. There can be some resentment and things along those lines, but it doesn't mean that holding that like grudge against another person, that's not good for you going forward either. Like yes, it hurts, it's painful, it's an awful experience to have, but if you don't recover from that, you're never going to be able to find the one that you need to fit in to your life.
Yeah. 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 Definitely. There's I agree. There's no need to resent people when it doesn't work. Um, and it is really important to know what you want and to know that you're not gonna figure all that out on a first date. And
Yeah, and
so,
I think there's value in that. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Like, there's a lot of value in casually dating, and hopefully, there's at least the respectful communication of consent and whatever that actually means to those two people. I wouldn't assume that casual dating for any number of other people means the same thing that I do. I expect that I need to communicate what that means to me so that everybody's on the same page.
yeah.
But you learn so much about the things that you like, don't like, can and cannot handle during that process.
Yeah. I think at the beginning it's it's all about getting to know each other, right? And I don't think that comes from asking like, "Are you a hard worker?" It's like no one's gonna be like, "You know what?
I'm a lazy
I'm a
bastard.
lazy yeah, exactly. I'm a lazy bastard and I don't really care about family. Like just screw family. Like and you know what? Like I'm not fun at all. Like I'm just like really not fun. It's like so all those things like I'm looking for someone who's fun, who's a family person, who's a hard worker. Like no one's gonna not put themselves in those categories. You know what I mean? Like like you know what? I'm just a total douchebag. Like if you're looking for a good person, like don't date me. Like no one's gonna think that about themselves. So it's about seeing it for yourself. And so I see the first few dates as like go on a date and like, do I want to see this person again? That's it. I'm not thinking, are you my husband? Like it's literally like, do I want to see this person again? Did I feel a spark? Do I feel like I want to see this person again? Just like instinct, like, yes, I want to see this person again or no. And it could be where it seems like it is the worst match in the world. Like, I don't know, like let's say somebody like lives in Albuquerque when you live in New York. But like it's like, you know what? I do want to see this person again. then I'll see that person again. And I'm not saying everyone should do that. Some people are very much like, I am not wasting any time. I'm only looking for this. But, well, that's how I found it, by being open-minded. But, like, I'm not saying everyone should make the decisions I made, but like those first few dates, it's like, do I want to see this person again? And the second date, it might be like, what am I getting to know about this person through experience? Getting to know about them through experience. And then when you've been on several dates, you've hung out several times, you've been talking consistently for, a couple months, then I can start thinking about, do I think there's potential for a relationship here? I can't even think about deciding that I mean, I can decide if it's a clear no.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's a very clear no. But like I
Yeah.
can't decide, like I don't have enough information. So I'm just having fun. I'm enjoying myself and I'm not afraid of getting hurt because I mean, first thing, I usually clear this up for people very quickly when they're like, I'm really scared. Like what if I get hurt? And I'm like, oh, I can clear that one up for you really quickly. We will get hurt. Okay, moving on now. Like now that we've like established that you will get hurt, how do you want to proceed? Do you want to like run away and not even try? Or are you like, all right, gonna get hurt and I'll be able to deal with it when I get hurt? And that's the thing. Like, yeah, I'm gonna get hurt. I'm not gonna break apart. I'm not gonna crumble. Like, I mean, especially for people who have gone through a divorce, like that is some of the worst like
Oh,
relationship hurt like you can experience, and like, I didn't initiate my divorce. So talk about like fear of rejection, talk about like, fear, like, abandonment and like self-worth, like the person who knows you the most, who you like live your life with, who you're supposed to be with forever, being like, you know what, don't want you. Like that's I've been through that, and it's okay. So Tinder guy who ghosted me, like it's like I'm not even worried about it. So like I feel like that like knowing I can handle it, knowing that I can handle the pain of a relation, not even like a relationship, yes, but just a connection not working out. It's like I my guard is down, right? So now I'm relaxed, I'm having fun, and I can genuinely connect with someone because my walls are down. And I feel like that helped me to have amazing experiences. And when I ran into the not so amazing people out there, it like I wasn't like brewing over it for days afterwards. It was like, huh, okay, that just happened. Moving on. Like, I mean, I've
yeah.
ran into the people. Like I said, consent, like blatant, like ignoring boundaries that were clearly stated, physically pushing past them. I've had to deal with that. Every woman here has. A lot of the men, I'm sure too. But like consent, ghosting. I was ghosted after 6 months. And it was like, you know what? I can skip the awkward conversation. You've told me everything I need to know.
Some
Okay.
people go back to that.
I mean, it depends what you're looking for, like there's nothing like that's the thing. Like there's nothing wrong with going back to certain situations. Like there have been some people where I know that they have their toxic side and I keep our relationship or our connection, I wouldn't even call it a relationship, to where I'm not exposed to that. Where like that can't touch me. It's like our connection is here. It's like everyone has toxic aspects, and it's, are we doing our best with them? Are we working on them? Everyone has them, and some just really display them more than others. Um, but like, for people where they're like, oh, I don't know why I keep going back to this guy. We just have the best chemistry. And it's like, if you want to make an empowered choice to be like, this guy is good for this one thing. And don't get that confused with like, maybe we could work it out. Maybe he's gonna come around. Maybe maybe he just doesn't realize. Maybe he's just scared of it, of commitment. Like, no, no, no. It's like
Boundary.
if you want to go back because of that one thing, making a like if you make an empowered choice to do that, okay. But it's when it gets
You
all
can't be
muddy.
mad at them afterwards.
Yeah, yeah, it's I don't know. I won't even get into that.
I
There's
think
so
that
much there.
I think that where the some of these things come from is ignoring the signs that things aren't aligned or that they're not the person that they're leading on to be, and pretending, or maybe in your imagination you're like, well, that didn't make me feel so good, but you don't communicate it. You don't like try to figure out why you felt that way or ask them a question about why they did this, whatever it is. Like if they're supposed to be a family person but they're ditching their family literally every single opportunity they have to spend time with them, that begs the question, are they actually a family person by my definition, or what is their definition of family person, and how are they defining themselves that? And then if they can't come up with an answer that satisfies your nervous system to make you feel okay, then that's probably the sign that you need to break things off and be like, this isn't where things are at for me. Um, I saw a reel, I don't know how long ago it was. It was these, obviously these two people talking about, um I love you more than anything else in the world, and then that person receiving the information and creating these expectations about what that means without communicating either way. All they said is I love you, and then they're doing all these things that end up making the other person feel hurt or neglected or any number of other things. And there may like there's an interesting like argument one way, either this person doesn't really love me the way that they say they do, or their definition of love is significantly different than what mine is. If this is how they show love, I'm out. Or why, I mean, like there's these questions, but either way, like that's a bad sign. Like if they're communicating this but it doesn't make you feel the same way they're communicating it, listen to that. Listen to
Yeah.
it, figure it out. Don't just take their word for it. I think that most of the time people get hurt because they don't communicate the expectations. Somebody's not respecting the boundaries, or when it comes to how they choose to progress through those difficult experiences, conversations, whatever they may be, they let the other person off without an adequate explanation to understand why their expectation is significantly different than the actions that they're looking at. Like when I communicate that I love someone, there are certain actions that I project towards that person in multiple different ways to show my love for them. Now, one of those may be one that the partner feels really, really awful or awkward about for one reason or another. Maybe from an abuse or trauma or something along those lines. Like they just really don't like gifts because gifts were used in a way to control or manipulate them, and that really, like, getting gifts really makes them feel gross, but they love words of affirmation. Now you have sort of this ability to communicate through that. These are the ways that I feel love. Whereas, like, you could have someone who genuinely loves you giving you gifts and it not be received the way it's intended.
Mhm.
So, those are bits and pieces of how that can look for some people. Not obviously all inclusive, but communicating I'm really into my job, but they call out all the time. Like I really want to build my career, but they're never spending any time on what it's going to take to do that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really into exercise and or fitness and nutrition, and they're eating processed foods and they're never at the gym. Like, you can tell what that means, and if they're telling you this and then not following it up with the actions that show what they need to, listen, because
Yeah.
they're setting the expectation for you by saying this is what they want, this is what they're into, this is whatever. When they don't follow up with that, okay,
Yeah.
bye.
Yeah. That's why it brings it right back to wait until you see it yourself and make your own decisions about it. You know,
Yeah.
don't take, I'm a family man, I'm a hard worker, I'm any of that stuff, you know? Wait, like see for yourself and this, and when you have seen enough where you can say this person is a family person, this person is a good mom, this person is a hard worker, this person is, you know, shares my faith, or whatever it is that you're looking for, when you have seen them enough consistently to be confident that they do, then I think it's a good time to make decisions around that, you know?
Yeah. And I think that another point, I mean, we've touched on making sure that you communicate expectations, because if you don't communicate them, then you have no real, like, they can't read your mind.
Hmm.
Um, the really, really powerful one that I don't want to overshadow by the other ones about being respectful of people's desires and preferences, that one is a game changer for a lot of people. And I feel like I can't speak for all men, but I can say that based on my experience, it is so fantastic. It's a life-changing experience to feel like when you ask for a particular situation, or dynamic between you and your partner, and they're not, "Ooh," or they don't pass some kind of immediate judgment where you can tell that they're not okay with this. It helps them open up and be more expressive about a lot of different things, and not just the dynamics that they prefer or stuff along those lines. But then you have to respect consent both ways. Always, always, always. No means no. Doesn't mean try harder. I know a lot of people will play hard to get or feel like that that's an acceptable way to do things, but I think that things have evolved well past that because of the dynamics that we're dealing with in society today. We really need to treat no as no, period. No, like anything else. The hard to get is a toxic, not accurately communicating expectations. If you're playing a
Yeah,
game like that, no, sorry. I'm gonna be in the car.
exactly. Oh my God. I've heard people say, like, yeah, but what if she's just playing hard? Or what if she didn't really mean it? Or what if she just was testing me to see if I would pursue? And I'm like, if she's doing that, then you shouldn't want to
Be
have
with her.
anything to do with that anyway. Like,
Yeah.
no, it's if someone is playing a game like that, and again, I said she because that's the context I usually hear it, but in any direction, if someone is playing a game like that, that's on them. That is, you still respect the no. If they're playing a game like that, that is 100% on them.
Yeah. I mean, it goes into manipulation and all kinds of other like shadow things that can come from that behavior. Um, a
Unless
need to
there's another
control,
safe word
whatever.
decided on.
What's that?
Unless there's another safe word decided on.
Well, yeah,
You know.
this is true. It's all part of the consent puzzle. Um, yeah. With those things, um, kind of wrapping things up because I know it's probably pretty close to Eric's bedtime, even though it's a weekend.
Yeah, he just got out of the shower. He'll eventually get clothes on. Be ready for bed.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I think that it's it's definitely not pretty out there. I think that a good percentage of the people who are single, and by that I mean not married and not in committed relationships, don't have the tools or the groundwork started with such that they have healthy communication skills where they can communicate what they want or what they're looking for in a non-judgmental, non-attacking, very like open and inviting and like compassionate but also enthusiastic way. I'm really into Legos are one of my favorite things ever in the world, and I really enjoy Legos. I have no problem with Legos. I hope that when it comes down to a choice between Legos and me, that this person would choose me a good percentage of the time, but I value in a partner that kind of passion.
Hmm.
Something that they are into, whether it's exercise or nutrition or any number of other things, that they can just nerd out and be passionate about. And I can watch them just be passionate about it. It's like
The
when I'm
Legos
talking
thing
about
was a
construction or
joke.
any number of other things, and you're like, I love listening to you talk about it, but wah, 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 I got nothing.
I have no idea what you're talking about, but it's I'm here to listen. Yeah. Yeah, the Legos thing was definitely a joke, unless you have
Yeah.
not told me this entire time that you're into Legos.
No, I have probably purchased more than my fair share of Legos, but most of that is for David. He actually prefers the bigger
Mm,
blocks, not the little tiny ones. But just as a sort of a nerdy hobby kind of situation, because some people think that like playing video games or gaming online is, a lesser preferred hobby than others. And I think there are certain ways that that can translate into things that are unhealthy, but you're not going to know that just because they say I'm a professional gamer or I play a lot of video games or like anything along those lines. You're not going to know until you see what that actually means to them. So let's not, it's that like if they're communicating a preference to playing video games as one of their hobbies, what does that actually look like? Watch them play video games and see what that looks like, and then decide whether or not that's something that you want to do or not. And if you need their attention or want their attention and they can't break away from that when you need or want the attention that you're looking for as a partner, there's another statistical point you can use to figure out whether this is going to work for you or not. But
mhm.
judging them for being into video games or dancing or slow pitch softball or chess or I don't know, pick another hobby you can think of that um
Yeah.
it's just because the hobbies don't align does not mean that there's incompatibility. I am not a big book reader. You are. I'm
Mhm.
glad that you are and that you consume knowledge in that way. I also find it incredibly hilarious that when you're listening to an audiobook, you like to listen to it at normal speed, and I will listen to it at 1.7 speed, so I get through that dang thing and I will you can attest to the fact that I absorb knowledge or
Yes.
information via hearing it significantly faster than most other
Yeah,
people.
I'm like processing on like so many layers that hearing it at normal speed allows my brain to do that. Like it's like bing, 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 bing. I'm making all these connections. I am like integrating it as I listen. Um,
Yeah,
yeah,
my
you mentioned
integration
about
happens at the end.
communication. You mentioned about communication. I just wanna like I feel like anyone from like the people from my end who listen to this, I just want to give them a lot of credit because I feel like um the conversations I have with them, like there are so many people out there who do a lot of work to be good at, communications and relationship skills um and all of that stuff, who will listen to the conversation we're having and be like, well, duh, of course. And so I just want to shout out to those people. Um, that a lot of the stuff we've talked about have come from places other than the people who are most likely watching this. And I'm really happy about that. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I think that, there's definitely a group of people who could find value in what we've just kind of discussed and gone through. And um, hopefully if they need some extra advice or they'd like to, let's say, dive into some of these ideas or topics more, or perhaps even hire you as a coach because you're wonderful at this kind of thing, they can message you, I'm sure, on Facebook, and get some extra helpful advice, because I believe wholeheartedly that one of the reasons that we connected the way we did was through those kinds of conversations. I have found so much value in just a general conversation outside of a coaching container or anything along those lines, where you have brought so many different frames of reference into mine that blended and integrated so well that it was just easy to continue evolving as a human being through that process. And the idea of chaos to clarity may not make sense to some people, but that's kind of the bread and butter of what that means. Like, you can bring someone this scattered idea of why they're struggling with dating, why they feel like they can't find the right match, or that they're all creeps, or nobody's respecting my boundaries, or like any number of these other things. And through two, three, four conversations, have 73 epiphanies if they're in the right frame of mind in doing the work and trying to figure out exactly where things could be going wrong.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. Um, and I think when it comes to dating, a lot of times the holistic resilience side ends up being extremely relevant, because a lot of the a lot of the difficulties with dating happen when we're dating out of fear. And holistic resilience is one of the ways we strengthen ourselves in many ways. But the result of that strength is that we don't feel scared and vulnerable. And, like I mentioned, not being afraid of getting hurt. Like, what are you going to do that I can't take? I can handle it. And because I can handle it doesn't mean I'm a masochist, but it means that I'm willing to take the risks that are necessary to find and build a quality relationship, right? Like, if I was dating out of fear, we would not have connected. Think about it, random guy on the internet keeps texting me. What does he want? That's creepy, or like, I wouldn't have invited you to New York, you know, um if I were afraid. Like, there are so many things to be afraid of in that situation.
Mm-hmm.
I felt like, we had been talking at that time for like 10 months. And so I saw, like, I helped you plan the road trip with the boys over the holidays, and I saw you so I knew you were serious. I saw the pictures from it, I knew you were serious about this. And so I really wanted to, huh?
Forget about this year's surprise. This time I basically did the whole thing.
Yeah, oh yeah, Eric's helping with this year's surprise. It's so amazing. Um, but like I wouldn't have invited you to New York. And when you came to New York, I wouldn't have gone all out in planning a great weekend for us. Because I'm like, I'm not gonna invest that much. He's probably, like that was vulnerable. It was vulnerable to put together something like that, knowing that you could get here and it could turn out that we weren't a match at all. And meanwhile, I had put all that effort in, and like planned it and bought tickets and all that stuff, So like there was risk involved, and I could have gotten burned at any time. I could have gotten hurt. It could have not worked at any point in time. And then when we did start having feelings, like it was another level of vulnerability because like given our situation, we live so far apart, we have co-parents in our respective areas. It's like, what does that mean? How is it going to come together? That's a, like you said, it's a pretty tall order to figure out how to make that work in a way that's ethical and good for our families. And it's it wouldn't have happened. We couldn't have this. I couldn't be here if I didn't know that I could take it if things go wrong at any moment, you know?
Yeah.
And real love requires that kind of risk and vulnerability. Not always in this exact manner, right? I'm not saying everyone should take the type of risk that I chose to take, but even just regular dating requires being vulnerable and opening up and getting hurt. Like you will get hurt. You will absolutely get hurt. I've gotten hurt. I've felt like crap. I've gotten rejected. Um, and if I were afraid of that happening, if I made all my decisions around trying to prevent that from happening, I wouldn't have opened myself up for some of the most amazing experiences I had, like the wonderful dating experiences I had with people who ended up not being the right match, but we had beautiful experiences and connections while they lasted, and ultimately meeting you.
Yeah, I mean, everything that we had up until last November was all just a combined wonderful experience that I hope, looking back on everything, I think we grew a lot as individuals, and it wasn't specifically about trying to build a foundation for a future specifically, like that's part of it. But it was a natural byproduct of just walking into this knowing that either one of us could get hurt, either one of us could pull the plug at any particular moment until, we got to a point where it was like, well, there's more here than we're pretending isn't, so we should just call it what it is. But like you were talking about, we expressed to each other many times that um we wanted the kind of deep love that was just completely unbreakable. And by the time both of us are ready to leave this earth, that it's more painful than anything that we have ever experienced before, because we built that love, that level of devotion to one another over the rest of our lifetime. And if that's something that you're looking for, then you need to align yourself with a person who is also looking for that. Otherwise, you are setting yourself up for failure. That expectation needs to be communicated, and if you're looking for something that's that deep, then they need to understand, because just like with any other loving relationship, the act of love in that frame, not with like children specifically, but in a romantic relationship, is you're giving someone a detonator to a bomb right next to your heart. If it doesn't last for the rest of your lives, that bomb is going to go off.
And even if it does last for the rest of your lives, that bomb is going to go off for one of you most likely.
Yeah.
Think about it. What are the chances how many couples die at the same time?
Yeah,
You
not
know?
not not close enough. Like I had a great grandfather who passed about 6 months after his wife did, and I was like 8 at the time. But
Mm.
he was absolutely miserable for 6 months.
Statistically, there's like a very high percentage of men who pass within a year of losing their wives, and wives tend to statistically last for many years afterwards more often. And watching my grandmothers become widows has been so painful. And I'm just watching. Imagine for them.
Yeah. But that's what people like us sign up for when you're a hopeless romantic. It's
Exactly. So pain, it's gonna happen.
yeah.
Yeah.
If you're not ready for the pain, if you don't think you can handle it, whatever, don't even walk out there. Like figure out what your hobbies are, focus on yourself, do what makes you happy without a relationship, without looking for anything. Maybe the right person will come up and it will just click for you, but if you're not capable of handling the pain that will come from the eventual rejection on, whatever level and whatever time frame, focus on yourself and stay out of that because you're going to project it into your dating life regardless of how much you try to guard yourself or like anything else or protect your heart. It's going to happen.
Yeah. And if you're putting so much energy into protecting yourself, then that takes energy away from loving and caring for and investing in your partner and your relationship.
Yeah. Hopefully people don't feel like all men and or in this case all women are toxic or bad or
Oh God,
whatever.
definitely not. Definitely not. Like, or and put it another way,
Hurt,
all of
yes.
us have our toxic moments. That doesn't
Yeah.
mean that we're all toxic individuals. And here's one, if you can't if you can't identify your toxic tendencies and you're not actively working on them, then that's probably going to set you up for some rough relationship experiences because it's very easy to be blind to our own tendencies or make excuses for them. Like, oh, well, I'm generally a good person, but this was an extenuating circumstance. This wasn't my normal self. Um,
Or they have the ego where they don't accept or believe that it's as bad as it is or that it doesn't need to be worked on because it only happens now and then.
yeah, we all tend to overvalue our strengths and undervalue our weaknesses. That's like a normal human bias. We value and being aware of that, um, like none of us is exempt from being toxic, and we can put in all the work. At some point, there is an amount of pressure where it will come out.
Yeah.
Um, hopefully not to the extreme, hopefully not very often. But
Hopefully
yeah,
not
so
not threatening anyone's safety or anything along those lines, but yeah,
yeah.
everybody
And it's not an
everybody has their
excuse.
toxic traits no matter who you are, no matter what situation you found yourself in the past or are looking to get into the future. There is something that probably needs to be worked on. And if you find yourself thinking that it's always their fault, you should probably look in the mirror. It's not
Yeah,
always someone else's fault. There's always a way or a situation that, things weren't communicated or whatever that led to those things happening that it's really hard to take credit for. Like it does not feel good to take credit for those things sometimes, but that doesn't mean
it's
that it
not.
isn't needed because then you can't find the one down the road because you will tank it. You'll
Mhm.
absolutely dumpster fire that thing.
Absolutely. Eric, you want to tell them about the surprise?
What surprise?
The boys aren't there. And the boys
They're not there, right? They're not in the
Not
room with
not in the room, no.
Will they? Is it a possibility for them to hear you?
Probably not. If you go quickly.
Okay. It is an Amtrak adventure to Washington, D.C.
So we're gonna fly to New York and then take an Amtrak to Washington, DC, and then tour DC for about a week before we come back.
to New
Kind of
York.
similarly to our adventure to Williamsburg, Virginia last year.
Yeah. And Eric has been writing the book that Santa's gonna leave under the tree that reveals the trip. And he's
Yep.
done a really fantastic job.
He has.
How
And I still owe
many-
you some pictures.
Yes, yes, definitely we need pictures of the elves planning the trip.
We already have pictures, remember?
Yeah, but we needed some more. Remember? We needed
You'll have
some
to
more.
tell me what pictures you want so I can set them up. But I
Okay.
think it's
What?
getting close to
That's
bedtime over here
enough.
too. So
Alrighty.
Don't you
Hopefully-
think that's enough?
I'm sorry, Eric.
At least we have a counterfeit taxi for over there.
Yes.
Hopefully anybody watching this finds value in the ways that we discuss things and sort of some of the modeling of language and such. I would highly suggest reaching out to Nicole if you have any other questions about how different things can be phrased, if you're interested in any type of holistic health or relationship coaching. She is absolutely wonderful. And yeah, we're looking for opportunities to help people understand where they can improve their life in any number of ways, but not to, single out dating specifically, but your resources are extensive.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, and to clarify, relationships falls under the holistic health umbrella, holistic resilience. There are also dating and relationship coaches who are what they do is a little bit different. But yes, that definitely falls under the work that I do as well in a slightly different way.
Yeah, if they're looking for a dating coach, I have one or two names that I can set them
Oh,
up
yeah.
with as well. But
Oh yeah, definitely. Actually, if they're looking for dating coaching, there's an amazing program that's starting in a week that's called the 90-day relationship experiment. And if anyone wants information on it, I can the coaches, I know the coaches running it and they're fantastic. I can send that information over.
Excuse me, Mom.
Yes, bud.
Do you think that's a good
Not right now. We're live on the internet. I'll have to take the pictures another time. Go brush your teeth. I'm gonna suck you in soon.
well, thank you for
Yeah,
joining
thank
me.
you so much. Thank you so much for inviting me on again.
Of course.
I always enjoy talking with you and staring at you. I'll stare at you as much as I can.
Likewise. This wonderful, just everything.
Love you.
Love you too. Good night.
Good night.
And good night, Facebook.
Good night.
Hmm.